spent a long time agonizing over what to say, and I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to start. We're making bread. It's white bread. It's very fluffy and I like it. First you need 1 egg. I'm not using eggs, they're expensive. I'm using golden flax gel, which I can tell you another time how to make. But for right now, I suggest that you use an egg. I'm tripling my dough today, so I'm using 3 eggs. Then you'll need 3 tablespoons of sugar. And again, I'm tripling it, so I'll use 9. The next thing to add in is going to be the yeast. I have active dry yeast, so I need to mix it into some lukewarm to warm water. Alright, again, so since I'm tripling it, I'll need 3/4 cup of warm water. And I'm not going to need the tablespoon, I'll need a teaspoon this time. To the 3/4 cup of warm water, I added 6 3/4 teaspoons of active dry yeast. I keep my yeast in the fridge because it lasts longer that way. You could use a whisk or a fork to mix this. I like to use a fork, it's easier for me. Next I need to add a cup of milk. Three cups of milk for the tripled recipe, 1 cup of milk for the regular. Whisk this together. Alright, set this mixture off to the side, and then for the tripled mixture, I'm going to add a 3/4 cup of melted butter. For the regular recipe, just add 1/4 cup. While the butter is melting, I'll just talk about this paper that I have right quick. You'll notice that I keep looking down at this paper, and essentially what it is the written form of this recipe. Sometimes it's hard for me to remember everything that I've done as far as recipes go, or the recipe that I found online, and so it helps me to write it down and have it physically available for myself. Next, the salt can be added, and since I'm tripling, I'll be adding 1.5 teaspoons of salt. The salt I have here is Himalayan pink salt. Now that these are combined for a tripled recipe, I need to add 9 cups of flour. For the regular recipe, you'd add 3 cups of flour. Of course, this bowl is going to be much too small for that, so I'm going to have to transfer it to a larger bowl. Something that helps make sure that my bread isn't too dense and it gets that nice fluffy texture is to spoon the flour into the measuring cup instead of packing it in. I am a person who does not like to have a messy workspace, otherwise I don't enjoy doing the work, so I like to kind of clean up as I go. Don't forget to wash your hands again after cleaning up because you'll be using your hands to touch the dough. Make sure that as you're mixing, you're scraping the sides of the bowl, so you're letting any of that flour that's stuck to the sides come loose. I kind of start by folding in the flour, so that way it doesn't go flying everywhere when I start really mixing it. Now you could do this in your KitchenAid mixer with the dough hook. If you have one, I'd recommend it. I just don't have one. They're quite expensive. Alright, now that it's gotten to be a thick, sticky mixture like this, I'm going to go ahead and get in there with my hands. I really hate having sticky hands, so what I like to do is actually rub my hands in butter first to make them not quite as sticky. You really don't need too much for your hands, just about that much. Set it to the side in case you need more as you go, because I usually do. It's kind of weird, but you rub it on like lotion. Don't forget to get your thumbs, you will use them. Alright, and then once you have your hands covered in grease like that, then you can go ahead and start to mix with your hands. Basically when I'm doing this, and you'll see my hands are still sticking, but they're not sticking as badly as they would be if I had not greased my hands first. Anyway, but what I'm doing while I'm mixing with my hands is I'm kind of pulling it away from the sides of the bowl and squeezing. And as I squeeze it, what I'm looking for are any lumps and bumps that need to be kind of squeezed out, so that way you can have a nice smooth dough without any lumps of flour or salt or anything like that. That can happen, especially with my pink Himalayan salt. I get the fine ground salt, and so sometimes when I put it in, even when I whisk it, it can tend to clump up upon touching liquids. Continue to do this until the dough is actually smooth. I know it can be really tedious and it can be really tempting to stop kneading the dough when it looks just well mixed, but until you really can tell that the dough is lump free, you should continue to knead it. If you miss some of those lumps, you'll definitely be able to tell in the finished products. It's one of those things that can't really be skipped. Go ahead and scrape the side of that bowl with your hand to help gather the dough into kind of one place. And now what I'm doing is I'm going in with just one hand to knead it a little bit more aggressively. Once you have this nice sticky consistency and it's sticking to itself more than anything, it'll still stick to your hands, but once it's sticking to itself more than anything, you can wash your hands well and then cover this with either a tea towel, saran wrap, or foil. Tea towel is ideal because it can be reused, and when you're finished with it, you can just wash it. However, I'm running kind of low on tea towels at the moment, so what I'm going to use is foil. Try your best to cover it tightly with no gaps, so that way it can rise. I'm going to put it in the oven for about an hour. The oven will remain off, but the oven light will be on to provide just a little bit of warmth to help the dough rise. Now that the dough is in the oven rising, what you can take a moment to do is clean up your workspace. For example, putting away the butter, the knife, cleaning up the spoon, wash the counters, things like that. Also, while the dough is in the oven, I thought that I could take some time to show you what we got in our groceries this week. This is a large grocery haul that will last us for about 3 weeks. It's just me, my husband, and our 2 children, so for us this will last quite a while. One of our main staple items is a potato. We like to get the large 10-pound bag because it lasts us for a while. Another few staple items are some onions, as well as mushrooms. These ones are white whole mushrooms. I like white mushrooms, brown mushrooms, portobello mushrooms, all the mushrooms, but these white mushrooms and portobello mushrooms I find go the best in the meals that we tend to make here. I did also grab some grape tomatoes because they are a snack that I really enjoy just to have now and then when I'm feeling peckish, I guess. Next up we have some orange and yellow bell peppers. We tend to get bell peppers of any color. They do have different flavors, so I just kind of choose according to the flavor of the meal that I'm making at the moment. The next and arguably most important produce item would be bananas. It's one of the first things that our children ask for when they wake up in the morning, so we like to make sure that we always have them on hand. I did get some grapes to snack on as well. However, it does look like I'm going to have to go through them tonight and pick out any that are rotten, because it seems like the last 2 batches of grapes that we've gotten have had a few rotten grapes, but the majority of them look totally fine. So it's really important that I pick out the rotten ones right away to avoid any of that from spreading. Please keep in mind that we want to avoid food waste the best we can, so if you see a couple of rotten grapes, that doesn't mean that they're all bad, and you should just make sure to get out the rotten ones as quickly as possible. The strawberries, however, look really great, and these are actually going to be used alongside a watermelon and some peaches in some juice that I'll be making later on. Then I got 2 of these. This is called Not Milk. It's a plant-based milk. Basically, my son has a cow milk protein allergy, which means that he can have almost any milk-based product, like yogurt, cheese, butter, all of those things, but he can't drink straight up milk because the protein hasn't been broken down yet. So as far as him drinking, he's only 1.5, so it's recommended for him to still be drinking milk. So this is what we give him because it is delicious and nutritious for him. And our daughter does still drink regular cow milk because that's what's been recommended by her pediatrician for her weight and for her age. So speaking of that, here I have a gallon of whole milk. The reason that I get whole milk right now is because our daughter is kind of a picky eater, so I like to make sure that she gets as many calories as possible to make sure that her weight stays in the right spot. And I also like to use whole milk in baking and cooking. I try not to use too much of it at a time, but it's really all down to what the recipe calls for. This is another dairy item. This is heavy whipping cream. I do get quite a bit of it at a time because I like to make my butter from scratch, and right now we live in the city where we don't really have access to fresh milk and fresh cream. So we like to get the store-bought one and do what we can with that for the time being. What I also get out of this is buttermilk. I can make cream cheese. There's a lot of different things you can make with this, so it's very useful to have. For the juice that I mentioned earlier, I grabbed some sliced peaches. I like to get them in 100% juice or in water if I can find them like that. The reason I got canned peaches is because right now peaches are out of season for us, and I can't find fresh peaches in store. So this is what I have today, and that'll work just fine for what I need it for. Next, I got some clementines. I got a large bag of them because I can use them to bake with as well as just to eat as a snack. And a mini watermelon to use in our juice. I also grabbed some cilantro because we do like a lot of Southwest inspired dishes at our house. It just gives a really nice flavor to it, and I'm definitely not one of those people that thinks that cilantro tastes like soap. I really enjoy cilantro. Here's another important item. These are oats. We like to use them in breakfast items, granolas, bars, things of that sort. Next, I grabbed some trash bags because we were low. We do still buy the plastic store-bought trash bags. If you have a better alternative, please let me know, but for now, this is what we use. I also got some gallon freezer Ziploc bags. I like to use these to store breads and things like that. I do tend to reuse them, so I don't buy them very often. I throw them out if I'm putting something in it that's like sticky or wet. But as far as things like breads or muffins and things like that, I'll reuse them. These next two items are luxury items at our house. We do not buy these basically ever, but I got them because it's winter and I just thought it would be nice for our family to have a little treat and make some homemade hot chocolate. And so I bought some mini marshmallows and some chocolate chips. The reason that I buy these is because for me, marshmallows take way too long to make, and we don't really eat them very often, so it wouldn't be really time effective. And then I buy the chocolate as well because I don't know if you know, but making chocolate you should use cocoa butter, which is quite expensive, so I'd rather just buy chocolate that has already been made for me. Next are two of my favorite spices, which would be crushed red pepper and ground black pepper. Ground black pepper goes on almost every one of our meals. It is one of my favorite spices. I really enjoy it. Some people would argue and say that I actually put too much, but I don't know, I just really enjoy it for some reason. Next, this is one of our guilty pleasure items, the caramel vanilla cream coffee pods for the Keurig. We do have a reusable pod and loose coffee grounds that can be used as well. However, whenever this is on sale, we really like to get it because it's just one of our favorite coffees. Next, I have my cheese items, which would be the Parmesan cheese. Cheddar cheese will get medium or sharp most times. And pepper jack cheese, I don't usually get pepper jack cheese. Usually what I would get is mozzarella, but we already have mozzarella, which I'll be using in a bread soon. But I thought that it would be nice to get some pepper jack because it was on sale. So you might notice that I got the block versions because I have a grater at home, so I like to have freshly grated cheese as opposed to pre-shredded cheese. I don't have anything against pre-shredded cheese, I just like it more to be fresh grated. This is something I haven't learned how to make myself yet, which is potato gnocchi, which I believe I say totally wrong, but if I do, I apologize. At some point I would like to learn how to make this myself, but it hasn't been one of my top priorities. Next we have our meat item. This time I got some bratwurst, which is something that I haven't really bought in, I don't know, maybe a few years, but I bought it because recently we visited my parents back in the Midwest and we had some and it just reminded me that I enjoy them. And we also got some bacon at the request of my husband. We've got 5 pounds of chicken breast, which I'm going to separate, and some will be refrigerated to be used this week, and some will be frozen to be used in later weeks. I'm going to keep it in the bag because I don't want to touch the chicken essentially, and I don't want it to get on anything, so I like to just keep it in the bag for now until I get to separating it. I got 8 pounds of ground beef, and it'll be separated the same way. So some of it will go in the refrigerator to be used this week, and some will go in the freezer to be used next week and the week after. With that, I'm going to quickly put away all of these items and take our dough out of the oven. You'll notice that when you take the bowl out of the oven, it does have that nice yeasty smell to it, which tells you that it has risen without even looking at it. That is some good news. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish kneading this dough and separating it out into 3 parts so that I can have some plain white bread, some spicy mozzarella bread, and some donuts. One thing I did just make sure to do was to wash my hands again. I did put away all my groceries, which means that I touched quite a few things, and it's important to keep your hands clean, especially right before you're about to put them inside some dough. What I need to do first is again to grease my hands. So here again I have my butter. So I'm going to take a small amount. And rub it all over my hands to avoid sticking to the dough. I'm going to start by quickly and gently pulling it away from the sides of the bowl. That way I could actually start to separate the dough into portions. I'm going to start kind of breaking this into sections here, which is a little bit of a messy process, but that is okay because we can set aside 2 of the sections for now and work with just the one section. What we need to do now that we've kneaded it just a little bit more and are separating it, is that we need to form the dough into whatever shape we want. For example, we're going to start with the plain white bread, then we'll move on to the spicy mozzarella bread, and lastly we will work on donuts if we have time yet. So these piles look fairly even. Alright, and I'm going to set 2 of these sections to the side, the one for the donuts and the one for the spicy mozzarella dough. So then I'll move my first pile of dough to the center of my work surface and go ahead and wash your hands again. The next item I'm getting out is my plastic rolling pin. I most often use this for cake baking, but recently I used it for rolling out my dough and found that it worked quite well, so I'm going to use this one instead of my wooden rolling pin. I'll go ahead and set that spoon to the side as I no longer need it, and then what I will do is go ahead and grease the rolling pin to avoid any of the dough sticking to the rolling pin. And by doing it with your hands, you are also greasing your hands at the same time, which makes sure that, again, it does not stick to your hands. So I'm going to first start rolling it away from me and then toward me. And now the shape is not incredibly important to this one, as it's just going to be a plain loaf. So now that the dough has been rolled out fairly large, I am actually just going to start rolling it into itself. I'm going to fold in that edge almost like a little burrito. So you can kind of see the shape that it's taking here. I have a little roll started at the top, each side folded in just a small bit, and then I'm going to continue to roll it to the end. Then you'll see it's kind of a large tube. I'm stretching it gently, and then what you can do is kind of fold it in on itself like this. Go ahead and grab one of your clean tins, and you're going to spray it with Pam, or you can grease it with butter. The butter's right here, so I might just go ahead and do that. You will only need a small amount, especially if you're using homemade butter. You'll lift up your dough and place it in the tin, like so. And this is about what you're looking at. The dough will fix any gaps and holes on its own, as it will rise for another 40 minutes, mind you. So there's the plain white bread ready. And again, I'm going to cover that with foil so it can rise again for another 40 minutes. Next up is going to be the spicy mozzarella bread. So we're going to kind of start with the same process by rolling out the dough to be kind of a large shape. With this dough, I do prefer to roll it out larger because the larger that it is, the more mozzarella that you can fit inside. And beyond that, you can roll it more times. Spread butter, a very, very small amount. The next thing that I want to add are some green onions, and I'm going to go ahead and wash those very quickly. My knife skills are lacking, so please do not come for me. My husband has worked in kitchens for years and has tried to correct my knife skills, and I just cannot get it together, apparently. Spread this evenly over the entire loaf. Add about 2 pinches of crushed red pepper. Alright, and then the next step is going to be to add some mozzarella slices. So I'm going to grab some mozzarella. Keep in mind, I'm definitely not a pro at any of this. So some of the techniques that you see me use are not the right way to do something. So don't get too hung up on the details or about how exactly I do things, because not everything is exact and I'm just kind of learning as I go. So I'm just sharing with you what I do currently. I'm going to lay these slices, they're kind of longer slices. I'm going to lay them going across the dough like this, so that way when we roll it, they go the correct direction. So that actually ended up being the perfect amount. So now the entire dough is covered in butter, green onion, crushed red pepper, and mozzarella cheese. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and start to roll it just like we did the other one. And so I'm going to go ahead and cover that as well and let it sit for about 20 minutes. Since it's a larger loaf, I don't need it to rise as much. Last bit of dough, which you'll see this is now the lightest and most airy dough out of all three. But basically what I want from this is I'm not going to roll it out too far, as far as it's going to get. Alright, and then the next step is I'm going to cut out some donuts. Now I don't have a special like cookie cutter shape or anything like that, so what I'm going to use is a mug. Then I'm going to roll out the remaining dough because there's still part of it. Looking at the timer, it looks like we've got about 7 minutes left on the dough that's rising in the oven. Because I do not have any like special tools or anything like that, I'm just using this little cutter tool. It's like a rotary cutter to help me make holes in the center. You could use a spoon, you could use literally just your fingers. I just chose a random tool that I figured could help me. Remember that when you're cooking at home, you don't always have to have like the latest tools because you can get by with whatever you have most times. Just in time, there is our timer. So I'm going to go ahead and set that to the side as well. And I'm just going to actually allow these donuts to rise just a little bit longer. I'm not going to cover them, I'm just going to kind of leave them as they are for about 10 minutes. Alright, next as we remove the loaves from the oven, you'll see that they have indeed pushed these off. Look how beautiful that is, having crowned the tin. So what you'll see that I have next is I've got some more golden flaxseed gel in this bowl here. You can see that it has a very similar texture to egg yolk. So that's what I'll be using today as egg wash. If you have one of these handy little things, you can go ahead and use one. If you don't, you can just use a spoon to kind of spread it around on top of the loaves. Again, if you don't have the flax gel, please just use an egg. It's really not a big deal. I use the flax gel because eggs are just really pricey right now and I'm not comfortable paying $7 for 12 eggs. Or if you happen to have farm fresh eggs, which would be really nice, please use those as well. For me, I don't have either of those things, so the flax gel gets the job done. If you notice that any of the flax seeds actually get on top of the loaf, you could just take it off and it's not a big deal. Right now I have the oven preheating to 355 degrees, and while that's happening, I'm going to take the loaf that has spicy mozzarella inside. So I'm going to actually go ahead and sprinkle just a little bit more red pepper on top. This kind of gives it a nice decorative look. While that oven is preheating, what we're gonna do is wash our hands one more time. The next step is to grab a pot. Great, okay, now that you have your pot, we're going to fill it up with some oil. What I have is vegetable oil. And you will need quite a bit, I'm not gonna lie. I'm just gonna have to use the rest of mine. I actually don't have very much. So, that's okay. I can grab some at the store tomorrow. I'm gonna go ahead and give that just a little bit of time to catch up and heat up. While I'm doing that, I'm going to spread some sugar here so that as we're pulling the donuts out of the oil, we can place them right in some sugar and give them a nice little coating. The next step is going to be to transfer these donuts to the heated oil. Please do this carefully. You don't want to get the oil on your skin by any means. Now that I've dropped in some of the donuts, I'm going to go ahead and grab out some tongs so that way once they really start to cook, I can flip them easily without burning my hands. And really what I'm looking for is the donuts are floating in the oil, there's bubbles surrounding them, but the oil is not popping or anything like that. And then right around the edges, I'm looking for it to get that nice golden brown, and that's how I know that it's time to flip them. You'll notice that as they're cooking, they begin to puff up as well, which is exactly what you want. I'm seeing a nice golden color come through, so I'm going to go ahead and start to flip the donuts. Tricky. Be careful that you don't squish them as you flip them. You don't want them to lose that nice airy texture. Okay, once you see that nice golden brown color right here, we're going to go ahead and drop it in the sugar. And then we're going to go ahead and drop some more donuts right in the oil. Same thing, careful not to splash yourself with the oil. Again, you don't want any burns. Okay, now while those are cooking, we're going to go ahead and give these a little spin. You can also give it a nice little sprinkle if you feel that the shape of the donut is preventing it from getting evenly coated. The timer has gone off for our bread, so I'm going to go ahead and try and remove that from the oven. Oh my gosh. Honestly, just look how beautiful that bread is. That's the spicy mozzarella. And of course, our plain white loaf. So now I have turned out the bread loaves out onto our mat, which I moved over to the side to make room for our next project here, which is going to be to make our juice. That's going to be the final project of the day. So the first thing I'm going to do is make sure I have my pitcher ready, a large bowl. I'm going to move over my recipe from my bread. The first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and add 1 can of peaches to my blender. And then I'm going to go ahead and add these peaches in. Just 1 can at a time. And blend them right up until they're nice consistency. We're not going to worry about any pieces right now. We're going to put this through a sieve toward the end, so I'm really not too worried about that. I'll go ahead and do the other can. Since this is a juice, I'm just leaving that 100% peach juice included. Now normally, being who I am, I would clean out the blender before moving on to the next step, but because this is all for the same juice, I don't really mind just using it as is. Next is going to be the strawberries, so we're first going to need to rinse them and remove the stems. The peaches. I'm going to go ahead and give the blender a little rinse and wipe down because I'm noticing that it's starting to get some of the juice on the inside where I don't want it to be. Then the next step is going to be to cut up our watermelon. So I'm going to go ahead and get my big cutting board back out and the watermelon. You're just going to add it to the mixture. Alright. Then, last step is I'm going to add just the juice of 1 clementine to add a little nice tangy flavor to it without overpowering it. This one is actually going to really complement the peach that's in the juice. Alright, now that we've got this really nice juice, what we're going to do is grab our mesh strainer, place it right over the pitcher, grab a large spoon, go ahead and stir your mixture gently until it is well mixed. Set the spoon to the side and start to pour it directly into the strainer. Still need that spoon to kind of help move things along. and then because our juice only filled about half a pitcher, I am going to go ahead and add just a little water. That'll also kind of mellow out that flavor. It is a really intense flavor. I'm going to add about a 1/4 cup of sugar. And mix it well. Alright guys, so that is all we have for today. We did a nice white bread, a spicy mozzarella bread, donuts, and our own homemade juice. So I hope this helped you out in one way or another. I hope you have a great day tomorrow, and I'll see you next time.